This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer.
Farmers are often called the first environmentalists, and they were celebrated this past week on Earth Day. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio this week, but we will be hearing from Max Armstrong and Orion Samuelson a little bit later in the program. Before we go there, however, we should talk about the environment. Earth Day was this past week, and joining me to discuss it is Ernie Shea, currently serving as president for Solutions from the Land. Ernie, thanks for talking to us this week.
Mike, thanks so much for having me on the program, particularly as we look back to yesterday. Earth Day was celebrated, and that gives us a chance to recognize all the hardworking entrepreneurial farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners that are really working hard in delivering high-value ecosystem services and improvements to the environment.
They are, and Ernie, this is a trend that has been developing for a long time. You spent 20 years as the CEO of the National Association of Conservation Districts. You've seen agriculture adapt to the environment. Are we going in the right direction?
Oh, we absolutely are going in the right direction. I've seen a much greater recognition of the contributions that well-managed, sustainable farms and ranches make to this country. And the exciting news is this is the next chapter of the agricultural renaissance. Not only can well-managed farms and ranches deliver high-value food and feed and fiber and fuel, things that we're very familiar with, but they can also deliver much-needed ecosystem services. Things like the water we filter and store on working lands, the biodiversity and wildlife that we support and enhance, the carbon we sequester in the ground. The list goes on, and they really all are about improvements to quality of life, and that's what the world is looking for.
It certainly is, and they're looking for it and they're paying for it. Ernie, as you think about Solutions from the Land, how are you working with growers and with other partners to bring these high-value ecosystem solutions to fruition?
Well, it starts with the conversation, Mike, and so many farmers have been felt beat up by the public at large, by environmental activists, by policymakers even, for the problems that they create from the land. And they feel like they haven't been recognized in totality for all that they do. And what we've come to realize, and have been working on it for the last 20 years, is that there is so much more good happening than there are problems. And sure, we're not perfect, no industry is. But the fact that we are able to manage working lands for multiple outcomes that provide direct environmental improvements is the good news story that we're celebrating here as Earth Day celebrations have been rolling out, will continue over the next couple of days. And the key to success is valuing and recognizing and compensating farmers and ranchers and foresters for all that they do. And for us, we've been driving the message that payments for ecosystem service, incentive payments, are the best way to get these hardworking stewards of the land to scale up and deliver even more, rather than trying to saddle them with top-down regulatory mandates and standards that have to be met. Why not incentivize producers to do more with good conservation systems and climate-smart agriculture practices that will be so much more effective in improving productivity for the producer and profitability, along with these external benefits that benefit the general public.
That's true. And Ernie, Earth Day is a time we can look back and see the progress we've made. It's also a time we can look forward at expectations of progress coming in the future. As you think about incentive payments, do you think they could be coming shortly?
Well, we're already seeing them come in experimental ways. We have the beginnings of a carbon market system across the United States. There are water quality trading programs that are incentivizing producers to do more than just produce a commodity, but simultaneously produce an environmental outcome. And we think this is only going to scale up. As we work in Washington and as we work within the UN system globally, This is the key message that we're taking forward, that we need to transform from being so government-centric and focused on litigation to affect outcomes, and shift our focus to multi-stakeholder partnerships and collaborations where actors across the entire value chain with farmers at the center think creatively about how they can, at a landscape scale, deliver the outcomes that will benefit them and the general public.
It's great to see agriculture being the solution to global problems. Our thanks to Ernie Shea, president of Solutions from the Land. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And we're talking markets. Joining us this week is Joe Camp, the Director of Managed Programs at Comstock Investments. And Joe, corn prices knocking on all-time highs. Where does the market go from here in the short term?
We have some calls for double-digit corn futures, right? That's over $10. We look at all-time highs just above $8.40 here from years past when we talked about the drought scenario. What's different this time? Well, we don't have a drought, right? It's leading into the season, so we look at the last crop being tight because of strong demand that follows from shortfalls in production elsewhere, namely South America last year. Now we know we've got production and trade flows shut off in that key region of the Black Sea where there's a war fighting in Ukraine. And we have now weather issues ahead, not only for the Brazilian second crop, safrinha corn, but for the planting season now that's unfolding for the U.S. So that's why I think we'd be knocking on these unprecedented levels.
Well, you mentioned the weather concerns developing down in South America. Joe, what have you heard down there? Yeah,
our president at Comstock, Matthew Cruz, has got a family farm still in Brazil, and our contacts there share with us that areas of the center west region, which is so important for safrinha corn, they're starting to dry out. It's been about 2 or 3 weeks they've been in a severe deficit and leaning a little bit drier in the forecast, so that could curb production again of that second crop of corn. That's key because it's what the U.S. exporters compete most heavily against.
It is, and that's on the supply side. Joe, as you think of the demand side, we had the announcement last week, Joe Biden going to allow E15 sales year-round. Does that change your balance sheet much on the corn demand picture?
It does marginally. We could talk about maybe 25 or 50 million bushels of corn increased by allowing the E15 ethanol waiver here for the summer months. Going forward, that should be important to see ethanol maintain strength. It's been a strong year, one of the best evers for production. Margins have recovered, and now we're coming into the summer driving season, so we should see ethanol stocks decrease as demand picks up, and I think that's going to be a key part of the summer that we see people on the road again, driving automobiles, also traveling, eating out at restaurants too.
All right, things to look forward to there as things come back to life. Joe, weather, you mentioned. We have seen a lot of cold and wet weather across the central part of the country this spring. Is the market getting concerned about delayed planting in the course of corn?
I think so. The cold and wet in the central part of the U.S., also in the eastern corn belt. It's early, right, for the Midwest and the eastern corn belt, but we know that in the southeast and the Delta states, where there have also been too soggy, too cold, they've would have liked to have planted corn by now. So we're looking at situations where producers might start to switch what they will be putting into the ground from corn to, say, cotton or soybeans. And if those delays roll further forward north, that's going to be the same questions we have.
Wheat, Joe, we have seen 2 weeks in a row of dismal crop condition ratings on this winter wheat here in this country. Where does the wheat market go from here?
It's a similar story to what we're looking at with the U.S. planning weather concerns, because for wheat, it's split between east and west, where we have the western hard red winter wheat crop in states like Kansas and Oklahoma under tough conditions because of the drought. In the east, better off with the soft red winter wheat in states like Illinois and Ohio, east of the Mississippi River, where we grow the soft red winter wheat. That's better off for now. So it's going to be a split in classes like it was again last year, and we're going to have to see whether or not we can pick up the demand for wheat after we eventually, hopefully, harvest this year's winter crop.
On that demand side, are wheat exports coming back into the picture for American exporters?
Not yet, not at all really yet. Unfortunately, we would think we could have better demand flow from that cutoff of stocks in the Black Sea, Russia and Ukraine, but for now other sellers are stepping up, like France and the European Union or India for a first time in a while. So that could be down the road, but not yet.
All right. We'll be back for more market discussion with Joe Camp of Comstock Investments. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. And we're back talking markets with Joe Camp, the Director of Managed Programs for Comstock Investments. And Joe, I saw a headline on a wire service earlier this week. They said that Chinese importers have only secured about 14% of the beans they're going to need for this summer. That struck me as very low. What's your take on the Chinese demand situation?
I don't know about the specifics of the data, but it wouldn't surprise me that we could see a number like that, just generally indicative of very tight stocks in China. We could see that from evidence of their purchase habits as of late. What we are seeing in the U.S. is that the U.S. exporter is benefiting from longer in the season than normal for soybean export demand, and that, I think, is directly tied to the Brazilian bean crop being shorter this year and also the U.S. still having favorable prices relative to competitors like Brazil and Argentina. So China still stopped shopping in the U.S. market, and that's been a positive for price for sure.
Have they been shopping both in old crop bean supplies and in new crop beans?
Yeah, early in the calendar year, we started to see their demand shift towards the new crop fall delivery commitments, but then a notable feature was that they shifted buying interest back to the old crop, which was a clear indication that they had sniffed some of that worry that was going on about production in Brazil and started to figure out that they'd better up their coverage for this summer, which again, normally supplied by Brazil, not enough stocks, so you come into the U.S., we can see that they're shorthanded.
Now, we've also seen very strong domestic demand for soybeans. NOPA announced a record March crush this past week, Joe. When do prices get to the point of demand destruction?
We're wondering that, but we haven't seen it because of what you just allude to. Record processing demand on the oilseed side. We look ahead and we talk about all these crush plants coming up, popping up over the next 2 years. We're really optimistic about renewable diesel, sustainable jet fuels, and all of those things. So that's a big piece of demand, and we could mirror that with what's going on in ethanol and near record production weeks. So domestic processing, I think, still very well supported here in this market and going along with what we just mentioned, which is competition with the exporting sectors.
So with domestic demand running strong, export demand looking strong, Joe, do you hold off on new crop bean sales in here?
I think you can, but we're in a window where we're wanting to be very close to pulling the trigger once we have some comfortability with some comfort with what was planted here over the next couple of weeks.
All right. Joe, let's turn our focus over to the livestock market. We have seen cattle producers in this country battling really high input costs, fighting drought across much of the ground. Where do you see cattle prices, and let's talk fat cattle first, headed here in the short term?
Yeah, that seems to be the story, backing into first the feeders, where you talk about the drought and the rush of placements that we've seen over the past several months. Well, that will change here, and we'll talk about there being a shorter supply of replacements, and that should get into the market where eventually we see that the potential for live cattle futures is higher yet because of eventually higher feed costs that come into the market, but still overall strong demand. It could be the same thing that we say about grains. We've got strong domestic interest at the retail and restaurant level, and they're also competing, our consumers are, with record beef export demand.
With that said, Joe, with $4 and $5 gasoline, can the American consumer continue to provide that level of demand for beef?
And so that will be the question where we look at this summer whether or not we start to get some pushback against beef and maybe some greater acceptance of the other meats like pork and chicken here. But overall, we do feel like the consumer is going to get back out there this summer and still has the disposable income to eat beef.
All right, lots of things to watch as this summer comes into focus. Joe Camp, Director of Managed Programs with Comstock Investments. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Spring is in the air, and across the Corn Belt, farmers are getting equipment ready to get into the field. In 2022, that means more than just grease and oil changes. It means dealing with technology. Chad Colby has an update.
It was so nice to see, even though it was very limited, we saw a little bit of spring activity here in central Illinois this past week. If you follow our tech segments here on This Week in Agribusiness, it wasn't too long ago we featured Jacob Wade from the Wade Farms and his new 15-inch planter that he was setting up. I fielded a lot of questions about that planter, and one of those was a lot of people was interested about his configuration in the cab. What kind of monitors and how did he lay out the cab? So I caught Jacob. He was getting a little bit of a slow start this past week between rains of getting a few soybeans planted, and just wanted to show you inside the cab. He uses the Case IH Pro 1200 monitor. As you saw there briefly, he's got scales on his CCS tanks. He's got the cap stand system, and that's the liquid systems. He's got two products, two different tanks. He's got a product on the back, and then, of course, he's pulsing product right on the seat as well. Certainly, there's some manifolds and some hoses and a lot of things to make that work. But back in the cab, you can see it is a little bit busy. He's got the 2020 monitor there from Precision Planting. That's what he's using on the planter to control the planter. So downforce, all those features, of course. The main thing is the ride of the row unit, all those things. And then, of course, he's got the iPad hooked to that, and that's where he's recording all his data. That goes up to the cloud, and he can access that back in his office, certainly in the combine when he's harvesting as well. That's kind of the central brains of the system. You do notice that he does have the Case IH Pro 700 in there. There are a few functions of his new planter that he actually has to have that old monitor for. That's one of the things Jacob's looking forward to in the future is, getting from, really from 4 screens to 3 and then from 3 to 2. And you can see here, he did send me this video of him kind of beating the reins, and you can see he's got a lot going on in that cab, but he really likes the configuration of this new system.
Thanks, Chad. That was a great-looking Case IH tractor. And folks, later on in the program, we'll hear from the brand president of Case IH. So stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness.
Welcome back here to This Week in Agribusiness as we spend a little bit of time talking about agriculture and government with Steve Pitstick, who joins us here, chairman of the Illinois Soybean Association. One thing that comes to mind, and this was a throwback photo that I found of my father from some 60 years ago. He was in Washington, D.C., walking down the street, a bunch of guys wearing suits. He was out there to lobby. He was out there to call on his lawmakers because he was on the board of a rural electric cooperative in Indiana. This has been going on a long time. Yes. You folks still do it. We all have a right to lobby. It has to be a lot tougher these days than when old Jim Armstrong was going to Washington, right, Steve?
Yes, absolutely. It's a lot tougher these days trying to get in with the capital lockdowns and things like that. But just getting the opportunity. We'll be out there in June and trying to do that as a soybean association. But to get those personal interactions with those lawmakers and tell your story is vital. In the last week, 10 days, we were able to get some things through the Illinois legislature on biofuel. What used to be soy diesel, which is now biodiesel, we were able to get a sales tax exemption passed through the state assembly. It's still waiting to be signed by the governor, but it ramps up the sales tax incentive from 10% to 20% over the next 3 to 4 years. So that was a lot of personal talking. We were down there talking to the legislators, telling our story as a farmer, what we can provide the general consumer.
And what it means to the entire electorate, right? I mean, it has to have benefits all the way along, I think, in many instances, to make it saleable to urban lawmakers. Am I correct?
Yeah, we represent 43,000 farmers across the state of Illinois that are soybean producers. And we try to radiate that message out throughout the state, what vital interest agriculture is to the state's economy. I believe it's like a $9 billion industry. Just trying to tell our story.
You keep doors open for a lot of local businesses. The plates are full at the church because of many folks in an agriculture community and the ag businesses who support you, I'm sure you point out.
In Washington, sometimes it's important to get to those key staff members, is it not?
Yeah.
You may not be able to get to the lawmaker on a particular day, but the staffers call a lot of shots, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. In this day and age, it's totally the staff members that are doing the research, the background information, and you have to get an acquaintance with them, get in there, tell your story to them, and then they radiate that story up to that key member.
You mentioned that story, and I think some of us kind of laugh, about agriculture's always trying to tell its story. But truly, the lawmaker is looking for input in many instances, isn't he or she? They want to know what is affecting the constituency.
Yeah, exactly.
They need facts.
Yeah, they need the facts, the ground truth facts. What happens on the farm is very believable. We have a great story to tell. We just need to tell that more. I think of us as farmers, we're the original solar collectors, solar farms. We're taking that sun's energy and raising a crop. So how we tell our story is all vital.
The bipartisanship that was there when those guys back 60 years ago were going into Washington, it seems to have evaporated. Is there still that cooperation between lawmakers that is so necessary to get things passed? Or do you need that? Do you just have to continue to work on both sides?
So things have changed dramatically here in the last decade, you could say, maybe longer. But we need that cooperation from both sides. And I think agriculture brings that much more than other issues that are polarizing. Every state has its needs, especially in the Midwest, and being able to bring those people together that represent those states, agriculture does a good job.
We once had an Assistant Secretary of Agriculture, Carol Tucker Foreman, who was a very prominent consumer activist, much to the chagrin of some producers in agriculture. She said she was going to go to work to get a law to do away with political action committees. Her effort was to have a PAC that would do away with PACs. She wasn't successful. It's still a way of doing business, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's vital. Everybody has a PAC. Sometimes I think she may be on the right track, but it's vital today to have a PAC. We in Illinois Soy have a PAC, corn has a PAC, every organization has a PAC, trying to get the things done that we need to.
You spend a lot of time talking to lawmakers. Do you encourage other growers to do it too?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time myself. I would say most of my winter is talking to lawmakers, other associations, just trying to build the rapport with everybody and how we can work as an industry going forward. One of the big things that was passed was the infrastructure bill. We spent a lot of time talking about locks and dams. We've got some vital upgrades coming through that program. So just talking to people.
You folks in the corn and soybean industry were talking about infrastructure long before it became fashionable, before it was elevated on the national radar screen, because you know the importance of moving that crop to market and getting inputs moved to you. It's essential. This is a long road, though, isn't it, to see something happen?
Yeah, when I first started getting involved in leadership in the late 90s, that was one of the things that was on the table talking about. Mark 2000 was something that was, at the time, a big deal. It was trying to bring the carpenters union, the builders, and team together with the commodity organizations to get bridge, roads, and block and dam infrastructure fixed. And here we are 25 years later, finally seeing some success.
So the bottom line, get involved in your association and get involved in being somewhat politically active in your own way, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge. There's not enough time in a day to do everything, but I've tried to find time.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Steve Pitstick joining us this weekend. He's chair of the Illinois Soybean Association.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness, ladies and gentlemen. One of the things we've noticed over the past 10 years is how modern farm machinery continues to grow and continues to get more complicated. Max had a chance to check in with our friends at Case IH as they look to the future about just what farm machinery might be able to do. Max?
Mike, in our visit to the Case IH Experience Center in Racine, Wisconsin a few days ago, as you looked all around, there was a nod to the rich history of that company as you see some of the old machines on display. But in our visit with the president of Case IH Global, Scott Harris, we talked about the future, things like autonomy and electrification.
Sustainability is something that we're very interested in and committed to, and the company has been for some time, and recognized annually at the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and in other mechanisms and avenues. But yeah, electrification, autonomy, automation, all of it designed to help producers do more with every acre they work, but also to sustain that our ability to feed and produce on a fixed number of arable acres a growing population. And yeah.
You have invested. I mean, I think of Monarch, I think of Raven.
Yep.
You've put money into this, haven't you?
For sure. We're pursuing it aggressively. The industry's moving faster than ever. The needs and demands are moving faster than ever. Monarch is one of them. Raven is a really exciting new one, as you may be aware. I mean, they're really experts in the application space and in the precision application space specifically, but also in autonomy. And that acquisition is really facilitating the acceleration of the advancements that we started here with the autonomous tractor in 2016 to expand it to other platforms in spreading, for example, in fertilizer spreading, and in grain carts and in tillage. All of that is deeply in the works, and we'll be seeing those in the field this year.
For those doubting Thomases among us, and maybe I'm a little bit on the line there, on the border a little bit. Electrification, bringing that to tractors. This is a very real possibility. I mean, it's not pie in the sky, is it?
No, it's actually happening today. The challenge is going to be how do we move up the horsepower range, and with the size of batteries and what it takes in order to get the same power that we can get out of a diesel power plant today. But it's coming.
With the financial commitment that's being made, though, all across industry to electric generation motivation, movement of equipment, it's going to happen.
There's no question. And we're seeing even outside of our industry, the adjacencies are going there as well, whether it's over-the-road trucking or auto. We'll be leveraging those learnings as well along the way. There's absolutely no question.
Data. It's one of the most important crops, I've always said, that the farmer harvests in his or her operation, and you folks are really helping there as well, I trust.
Yeah, for sure. When you look at everything that's built into the farm fleet and field information on our AFS Connect portal, it's incredible the amount of data that's available to producers today. And it's not enough just to have the data. We've got to help them synthesize that data so that they can make good decisions for their field and their operation as we go, and our platform is designed to do just that.
As the one who leads this brand, when you get up into the cab, you climb those steps up there with the producer who's working in the field. What are some of the impressions you've come away with over the last year or two? What has been a lasting feeling after you went back down those steps?
That the farmer, while he is more sophisticated, more informed, demands more, understands his bottom line and the needs for additional productivity and getting more out of his land, at the heart, they're still the same. They're the same people that we've worked with for generations here that, again, are stalwarts in their community. They persevere through, the dynamic conditions, all conditions, whether it's economic, environmental, whatever, and they just get the job done. They've accepted a mission to feed the world, and I just find that so rewarding and so inspiring.
We've noted in our visits to the Case IH facilities in the past that many of the people who work there, many of the people who design and build the equipment also do farm. We'll share some comments from Scott Harris about that next weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Greg, as you look into your crystal ball, what's coming for the Pacific Northwest this week?
Well, more of the same. You know, the official rainy season for the West has wound down, but we have basically kept a plethora of weather systems moving on through, especially Northern California and points on northward, and that's the story for this week. Two more moisture makers on the move. Still some chilly to cold environs across the northern plains, and cleanup and recovery coming off the recent spat of severe weather from a winter storm standpoint out of Montana, the western Dakotas, and back up into the southern Canadian prairie. At least you got moisture, not necessarily in the form that you would have enjoyed it and liked it with livestock operations in mind. Certainly cleanup and recovery there. So we'll get this weather system to move up into the southern Canadian prairie, back into milder downslope winds here. Some snow melt where we have seen it of late. And the next weather system a little farther south into northern California, Pacific Northwest. So the moisture pattern continues on in good shape along and west of the Cascades. East with dryness and drought, a different story. Kind of a nice zonal west to east upper air flow. Boy, it's been hot through the southern valleys, desert southwest, and that wind has been blowing along with the fires into New Mexico and the southwest sections of the high plains. Couple of spotty showers on slightly cooler air settling into the central plains as the week wears on. The southern reflection of that upper trough and system into the Pacific Northwest will drive a front inland, a drop off in temperatures for the Sacramento Valley. No organized moisture to speak of. Usual warmth in the desert southwest, a touch of heat, a couple of showers and thunderstorms, but limited drought relief again for the western areas of the plains. There, Mike, eastern areas, especially southeast, too much of late.
Well, Greg, as the calendar turns to May, farmers in the central part of the U.S. are ready to get into the fields. What's the outlook look like?
Yeah, just small, incremental, single-digit paces of corn in the ground across parts of Nebraska and Missouri as well. This is a very wet corridor in here. We've seen drought improvement across Red River Valley of the north. Here's the latest weather system. Fairly weak, but still some snowflakes in the maps and charts as far south as the Twin Cities early in the week. Seasonal temperatures, dry time, and it's much needed across some of these waterlogged areas of the Corn Belt, and a nice recovery on temperatures would be appreciated, but it's been on a cooler note over the area coming off that cold front. But later in the week, some warmth across the western Corn Belt, seasonal temperatures and sunshine and some drying here, but another wide and expansive area of rain, maybe a little mountain snow across parts of the plains and marching to the east. We'll keep an eye on severe weather potential along and west of the Missouri, middle to late parts of the week, and especially from Kansas on southward. Still stuck down here, kind of a frontal boundary, trapping any significant moisture to the north early in the week. A couple of stray showers across the Gulf Coast areas. Cooler air, and at least that'll ease moisture requirements over parts of the southern plains, but it is just parched and we're back into strong wind, hot to warm temperatures, maybe a thunderstorm. Kansas and Oklahoma, most of the organized moisture western Gulf and spreading back northward into the southern Corn Belt there, Mike, later on into the week.
Greg, what do you see as you look at that eastern third of the country?
Eastern Corn Belt, wet and waterlogged in some areas of the east and south, too cool as well. And after the weekend warmth, another punch of some cooler to colder air moving on in. Cold high pressure across the northeast of New England. This is a fairly weak weather system, the one on its heels into the western Corn Belt. A different story. That east-northeast wind flow into a southerly wind flow here. We converge the air masses and showers and thunderstorms on the increase over the Mississippi Valley and points south and southwest. Meanwhile, cool, dry weather into the northeast and New England. And we need a little dry time across parts of the Delta region. Still some dryness and drought into the Carolinas, as well as parts of central and south Florida. As the week wears on, the showers and thunderstorms will be picking up into the Delta, Tennessee Valley to the north and east. High pressure control across the Carolinas southward into the Florida Panhandle.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, over the past several weeks, Greg, there has been an outbreak of wildfires across the Central Plains as the severe drought has held on and it's been coupled with high winds. Does that area have some relief in this next week?
And even single-digit % afternoon humidity, would you believe? There have been spots in western and central Kansas into Oklahoma that have had 1 or 2 or 3% relative humidity. It's in this corridor right here. We've had high wind, the low afternoon humidity, and some days there are, Mike, readings that have been up in the 88 to 92 degree range. So it is blowtorch here. But this week on the precip map, at least some very marginal improvement soil moisture-wise here. here. Most of it's where we've had it already into parts of Iowa, the southwestern Corn Belt, back into the southern sections as well. So not much field work anticipated here. More wet weather and severe in this part of the country, largely dry for the northeast and New England. Snow is back in the forecast here for parts of the high plains areas of the Dakotas. Still cleanup and recovery from the recent spat of severe weather, winter storm style. And there's more moisture as well for parts of the Pacific Northwest down into at least northern reaches of California as the week wears on.
Well, Greg, what do you expect to see as we flip the calendar to May?
Now, still cold, high pressure locked in here in this part of the country. Warmth basically from about the Missouri River on westward. Again, the clockwise flow at the surface is this way. At the surface, it's this way. And underneath the warm ridge, if you will, you get moisture to break on out. And storms will track across the southwest into the Pacific Northwest, northern plains, and drop south and southeast. So lighter amounts of moisture here. Maybe some opportunity for planting south and east. Wet weather back into the northern plains, Pacific Northwest. There, the drought relief is needed and appreciated.
It is, Greg. That second full week of May, do you see temps warm up enough that maybe some planting could get done?
We'll see at least a return to more seasonal temperatures here. Still some cool soils, especially far north and eastern Corn Belt locales. That warmth, if you will, retrogrades back across areas of the southern high plains, the southwestern sections of the country, much of the heartland into the southeast, looking at temperatures about normal. Precip-wise, it's going to be a busy weather pattern here with a northwest to southeast jet stream pattern. They drop in, these systems energize and swing to the north and northeast. This is what we're expecting. Additional planting delays here, more drought relief into the northern plains and worsening drought conditions, would you believe, central and southern plains back into the valleys of California and the Intermountain West.
Well, Greg, May 16th to the 22nd. What are you expecting that week?
Well, we ought to be going full tilt out there, and this is not real conducive of that, at least with warming soils and probably still some late season snow potential into the northern reaches of the country. The warmth across the Gulf Coast, the southwestern sections of the country, and temperatures about normal for much of the heartland into the Corn Belt. But it's a busy weather pattern. Additional drought relief good here, not so good parts of the southwest and southern high plains, nor is it good as well for planting and outdoor work across much of the Corn Belt into the northeast and New England.
Well, thank you, Greg. And folks, later on in the program, we will have an update for those of you who would like to assist those farmers who have been impacted by the wildfires. So stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
How many times at an antique tractor show have we found ourselves standing there looking at something and saying, I wonder why he put that on there? Why was that welded on there? We'll have a great example of that this weekend at Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. No matter the color of your equipment, you'll find Store Lock has something that'll fit into your shop and will serve you very well for decades. StoreLock.com is their website. Check it out. It's a fine-looking 1952 Farmall Super M, one made in Louisville, that Danny Wesh has at Cayuga, Indiana, just recently restored. The tractor was bought by his father 70 years ago this summer. Danny Wesh recalls plowing with that tractor. He'd plow till midnight as a high school student in the little Vermilion River bottoms there, and that muffler would glow in the darkness as he pulled a three-bottom plow. Nicely restored indeed by John Bruns. That tractor has an extra feature you might want to check out if you see it at a show, parade, or festival in the region. There's a curved rod that was welded on the rear wheels. That was a pig guard, crafted by Dan's dad, welded over the valve stem to keep the pigs from chewing on the stem while the tractor was in the pasture for the hog feeders being filled all of those years ago. One of those handcrafted attachments, one that makes Danny Wesh's Super M very special at Cayuga, Indiana. Well, every weekend we get the Big Iron Auctions report. We call upon Mark Stock for that. Let's bring him in right now.
Well, Max, the week of April 27th, we've got over 2,200 items selling. Leonard and Patricia Raymer, their estate auction in Leroy, Kansas, will include a Case IH Magnum 275 mechanical front tractor. They've got a Case IH 2388 combine. We've got Lutkin's Construction limited retirement sale out of Holstein, Iowa. They've got 164 items, including a John Deere 700J crawler dozer. They've got a John Deere 770B motor grader. We've got the Roy and Shirley Eggert retirement sale by Jansen, Nebraska. Dakota. They've got a 1993 Case IH 7140 mechanical front tractor. On April 28th, the Jerry Hawkins Estate in Pierre, South Dakota will sell over 120 items. Their auction includes a Clark, Michigan 290M 18-yard hydraulic scraper, John Deere 9770 combine, Peterbilt 379 semi-truck tractor. Two big sales, April 27th and 28th on BigIron.com.
Each week here on This Week in Agribusiness, we get to know an FFAer from around the country. And this week, we're talking with Brady Lawson. He's the Kentucky State FFA Secretary. And Brady, over this past year, what were some of the highlights for you as serving as Kentucky State Secretary?
Yes, well, first off, thank you all for having me. Of course, this past year's been filled with many memories, many discussions, many conversations with FFA members from across the state. I've been fortunate enough to travel around the state, meet a lot of new people, see a lot of old friends. Just having those conversations, finding those passions, finding those interests, it's just really been a very rewarding experience.
And Brady, what was it about FFA that prompted you to get involved in the first place?
Yes, well, for me, FFA has been a family tradition. My father was in FFA, my grandfather was in FFA. Most of my family have been in FFA on my dad's side. So with me, it was just a matter of time, was how quick can I get into FFA? And really just, I really found a home in my ag classes at my high school. As soon as, my freshman year, I was just like, I'm going to join FFA. I don't really care what it takes to do it. So, and I've been extremely blessed and happy with everything that's happened since.
And what was it that prompted you to get into leadership at FFA, Brady?
Yeah, well, I've always had an inclination to get into leadership positions. I like the planning, I like organizing, I like talking to people. And I know that those opportunities primarily come through being in leadership positions. So in those positions, I was able to build new relationships. I was able to do things kind of what I wanted with my vision, and I knew that I could really only do that if I was in those positions.
Well, that is fantastic. Brady, we wish you the best of luck as you move forward in your career. Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
It's confession time on Samuelson Says. I have to admit that I've developed a couple of bad habits since retirement, and I'm spending time watching reruns of those old westerns on television shows that I couldn't watch as a kid growing up because we didn't have electricity on the farm. But now I'm catching up with reruns of Gunsmoke and Bonanza and The Rifleman and the other shows, spending too much time watching television. But I also continue to learn, and let me share with you some of what I've learned. The word most often used in commercials on those television shows, it's free. Well, nothing is free, and if you respond and give them your phone number, you'll be plagued the rest of your life with phone calls wanting to sell you whatever the product might be. But I do enjoy the old westerns and catching up on shows that I missed as a kid. And then finally, bad news the past week or two when I was informed by my sister that the house on the farm where I grew up burned to the ground. Fortunately, no loss of life, but that took away the farm home where I was born and where I grew up. So I'll miss that. But other than that, we're off to a pretty good start. Snow is gone in Wisconsin, and hopefully it won't come back. But with the weather the way it is, you never know for sure. But thank you for putting up with some of my thoughts on what I have missed growing up and what I'm catching up with. The good news about the house, no one was injured, no loss of life. Be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness, ladies and gentlemen. One topic of conversation over the better part of the past year has been the ongoing drought in the Central Plains. Both the Northern Plains and the Southern Plains have been grappling with it, and as Greg mentioned during the weather forecast, the combination of drought, high winds, and very, very low relative humidity has created severe fire risk, and it has sparked several severe wildfires across the middle part of this country. One of the states that was impacted most severely was Nebraska. Max talked about that last week on the show, and this week we wanted to bring you some resources. If you're looking to give some assistance to those folks who have been impacted, these are the ways you can help. If you've got some monetary donations you'd like to make, they can be made to the Elwood Area Foundation, the Oxford Area Foundation, many local banks in the region, and if you've got questions, you can contact the Gosper and Furnas County Region 17 Emergency Manager Roger Powell, and his number is 308-268-5088. The Nebraska Cattlemen have also established a resource page on their website. You can visit that at nebraskacattlemen.org and just look for the relief tab. And then finally, one of the most impactful things that can be done right now is to donate hay and forage to those livestock that are struggling, and you can do that through the Nebraska Department of Agriculture on their hay and forage hotline, which is 402-471-4876. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by OMAX Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.